before Many Lives, Many Masters. It was called The Biology of Cholinergic Function. You can't find it. So I was really left-brained. And what happened to me was about the fourth or fifth time that Catherine was having one of these past lives. And I was still struggling with it, even though she was getting better. Even though at a deep level I knew this wasn't the usual stuff. Something really beyond the normal was going on here. She died in the Middle Ages lifetime, and she floated above her body, replicating the near-death experience work of Raymond Moody and Elizabeth Kubler-Ross and others. And she had never heard of these people, she told me. So she tells me she finds this beautiful light that re-energizes her. And she says to me, there are two people here to see you, your father and your son. Now, my training in psychotherapy was not to tell the patient anything about yourself. You want them to project that into the therapeutic arena.
Certainly.
So I don't even have diplomas. My diploma's hanging in my office. She knew nothing about me. And she was a laboratory technician in the hospital, not an FBI agent, not an investigative reporter. She tells me, my father is there and my son. She says, your father's name is Avram. And that's how she pronounced it, Avram. She's a Catholic woman from New England. She didn't say Abraham or anything like that. She said he died from his heart, and your daughter is named after him, and your son is here, and he's very tiny and shining brightly, and his heart is important also because it's turned around backwards, but now it's in the right place. And she went on to tell me many more details about my father and my son. My father died of a heart attack 2 years before her therapy began, so she was right about the heart. His Hebrew name was Avram, but nobody ever called him that. He was called Reds because of his hair color. Nobody except my wife and I in Miami knew this, and there was no place to look it up. He didn't even have an obituary when he died. And my daughter, Amy, was named after him, just as she knew. My first child, the son, died when he was 3 weeks old of a very rare congenital heart disease called total anomalous pulmonary venous drainage. What that is, the blood vessels from the lungs to the heart are coming in the wrong side of the heart. So functionally, as if it were turned around backwards. And he had died a decade before, 10 years before her therapy began. No place to look this up. He died in New York City. This therapy was taking place in Miami. Again, no obituary. Even our best friends didn't know these medical details. And I knew then, because as I mentioned, she's a laboratory technician, not an FBI agent. No place to look it up. She doesn't have money to look it up. I knew that this was something beyond the ordinary. And I remember my thought at that moment was, if she's right about these details about my father and my son, and she certainly was, could she be right about these other things, about past lives and reincarnation and life after death?
Sure.
And that was the moment probably that it really shifted for me. And the rest has been kind of filling in the data and following up these validation cases and watching patients heal from their phobias and even physical healings as well. So that was the epiphany part. That was when it happened for me.
In hypnotherapy, Dr. Weiss, how often is fantasy a common player in these sessions, or is it more likely to be a situation where the person has to tell the truth, or does it fall in between?
It's in between. They don't have to tell the truth. They're not forced to. They can censor even under hypnosis and not tell you things. And fantasy sometimes comes out. That's the art of the therapist. But generally, there are things that aren't fantasy, like her telling me about my father and my son, or the Chinese surgeon speaking English. Another case like that was of 2 boys around the age of 3 in New York City speaking a language to each other that seemed more than the rudimentary language that 3-year-old boys would make up. They were twins. The father is the physician. And the boys were taken to Columbia University, to the linguistics department, where it was ascertained that the boys were speaking Aramaic to each other.
Holy mackerel.
Yeah, and this is virtually extinct. It's spoken in probably a few remote areas of Syria, but boys had no exposure to this. The parents certainly had none. There's no cable channel that is in Aramaic in New York City. So
right.
When these things start adding up like this, you have to understand that Yes, imagination can be there, fantasy can be there, so can metaphor and symbol, but sometimes the truth is there too.
When you die, is there an indication that you are immediately reincarnated, or is there a period of time that passes, or is time an irrelevant word here?
It probably is relevant and irrelevant. I don't mean to evade it, but because there's time here, but there may not be time on the other side. And it's just like modern physics is talking about. So what happens is that when we die, our consciousness seems not to die. That is, people are describing the same thing to me all the time. They leave the physical body, they float above the consciousness, they sometimes, often, look down upon the scene they have just left. They then become aware of a spiritual figure or a relative helping them. They become aware of a light that often energizes them, takes away any pain, any discomfort. And then there's often a life review when you go over your life. How did you do? What did you learn? How did you treat people? And then the planning for the next life is already begun.
Really?
And it may happen very, very quickly, or it may be more than a century. It depends upon the needs of the soul and who you want to come back with, because there's the concept of soulmates or soul families, that you may have been together with many of the loved ones in your life before in different bodies. So that's the process, and it's really quite amazing that no matter who the patient is that I'm working with, it could be a physicist, it could be a scientist, it could be a therapist, it could be a person with a high school education or a grammar school education, and they're still describing the same phenomena, the same process, that floating out of the body, that consciousness never stops, and that we go on and we come back here. We still have lessons to learn.
You know, I have a lot of medical doctors, researchers, scientists on this program. And I would tell you right now that the majority of them, if you pin them to the wall, and I frequently do that, don't believe in God, don't believe in an afterlife. Believe that the process that you talked about with the light and all the rest of it is a simple manifestation, a physical manifestation of the brain's dying process. And they just simply think that when they die, it's all over. The worms in and out, the blackness, and absolute nothingness. That is indeed what a very, very high percentage of doctors and scientists believe.
Oh, I agree with you, and I was one of those too. And I have the real advantage of all these years and thousands of cases of experience, because they don't. And in general, what they're talking about is their opinion, because they haven't really studied the phenomena. So if I had the chance to regress them, then they would start to know more. If they, reading the books is one thing, but to actually have the experiences, and then they would start to understand more. Many who have had their own experiences or a near-death experience, then they know more. So, it's not just light that's caused by a chemical reaction when we die, because sometimes people in a near-death experience will go to the light, see the light, and they'll meet a spiritual figure or a relative, like Grandma, who then tells them that behind the doghouse out in the backyard, that's where she hid the jewelry and the important papers. And then they go out and dig up back there, and then they find the box with the jewelry in it, and the will, and that's not a chemical reaction. It's too specific. But again, I have the advantage of tracking these things down, of actually seeing thousands of cases, and they don't. This is their opinion, and I understand that. I was certainly one of those people before my experiences with Catherine.
All right.
And all the others.
Hold it right there. We're at the top of the hour. Dr. Brian Weiss.
Dr. Weiss is not the only psychiatrist who found these extraordinary cases. There are other psychiatrists who found similar results. Dr. Michael D. Newton, PhD in counseling psychology, talks about his cases of past life regression.
I'm a traditional therapist. Initially, I worked not in past life regression or in any of the things that I do today. Primarily, I was working in behavior modification and working with people who had problems with sleeping and with depression, this sort of thing. In time, people would come to me and ask, well, since you are working in hypnosis, is it possible that you could take me into a past life? And I was very imperious in those days. I said, no, I don't do those kinds of things. I'm terribly sorry, but I'm very traditional in my academic orientation, and you would have to go to somebody else for that kind of thing. So what happened to me was that after a number of years passed, I had a client who came complaining of a pain in his side. He told me that he'd been to many medical doctors, had x-rays, and was told that it was all psychosomatic. It was in his mind, and that if he just forgot about it, it would go away. But it was causing him intense pain, he wasn't sleeping well, and so forth. He asked me if I could possibly find any root causes for this in his childhood, if I could regress him to his childhood. So I did this, and we searched, and I looked through many of the early aspects of his childhood, and I could find him not falling on a sharp object or being involved with knives in any way or anything that would cause this very sharp pain in his side. So finally, in frustration, I said to this individual, who, by the way, went very deep very quickly in hypnosis, which is an important part of what I'm saying, because that, to me, is a key in reaching into the past life work that I now do and my interlife work. I said, go to the source of your pain. Tell me the first time it happened. And suddenly he was on the battlefields of France in World War I, in a British division at the Battle of the Somme, and was being bayoneted. So while the poor fellow had suddenly regressed into a past life, almost getting ahead of me, and he's lying in the mud dying, I'm so skeptical, because that's my nature, that I'm asking him to describe his division patch for me on his arm. What battle is this, I asked. Where are we? Who are you fighting? Because I'm not satisfied that this is really happening to me. So he described all these things very accurately, and since I am an amateur historian, I knew he was accurate. And so I realized that I'd had my first past life case, and I worked in desensitizing him just as I would have done if he'd have been a 6-year-old child who'd speared himself in the kitchen, for instance, while his mother wasn't there. So from that case, I realized that that past life regression was very real. I was still somewhat skeptical. I did a lot more experimenting, of course, and working with people, and a lot more time passed. And then what happened to me was another case, almost by accident. A lady came to me who complained of loneliness and isolation in society, and she felt that she was not really a part of this world, that she just felt so disoriented with the life that she was living and the people that were around her. She was thinking of suicide. And so again, I worked with this lady as I had done with this man, but not in past life work. We talked about a lot of childhood issues. I put her in hypnosis. We worked a lot with her early life and so forth, and really didn't come up with anything. So, like with the man I just spoke about, I asked this lady, go to the source of your loneliness and lack of companionship. And again, she was very somnambulistic. She went very deep very quickly. She was a very good hypnosis subject. And she said, I see them all right now, my companions, they're here in front of me. And I thought, you know, what are we talking about here? Is this a breach group? Who are these people? And she's staring at my office wall with a glazed look, and she sort of, her eyes are fluttering, and she's saying to me, no, these are my spiritual soulmates, and there are 8 of them, and she described who they are. And I couldn't believe this. There just chills went up and down my spine, that I had actually, I was talking to someone who was talking about a life between lives. And this is an area of which I had no experience and I'd read no books on. There weren't many books even touching on the subject. So from that case, I began to really research the area between lives. And I soon, as my practice, as time went on, my practice, I changed it to working basically with people who wanted to know about their immortality. People who now come to me who are interested in finding out who they really are, who their soulmates are, what their spirit group is like, why they are here on earth, and so forth. To me, these are the profound questions in life, and the psychological benefits that come from people knowing these points, these issues in their life, empower them in a way that they had not had before. And so that's essentially how I came to work in the area that I do today. You've got two types of people: those that understand hypnosis and the power of hypnosis and realize that it's for real. The AMA, I might add, has accepted hypnosis as a medical tool since 1958, which is rather late considering how long it's been around. But the point I want to make is that people do not hallucinate in hypnosis. The conscious mind is not unconscious. It's very aware of what is going on around at all times around the subject. It is not as if you were in bed asleep at night in a deep delta state. You are in what we call an alpha or theta state. So your conscious mind is able to work and help with information that we're deriving from your subconscious. And so hypnosis really, in terms of whether you want to believe in hypnosis or not, depends on your willingness to accept self-reports as data. And essentially, it's not like physics where we have formulas. In terms of scientific proof, one could argue that's not possible. All I can tell you is that I was a skeptic at first about the whole process of past life regression and working in the life between lives. And what convinced me that it was real and that my patients were telling me everything that had actually happened to them in the past was their consistency of their reports. It didn't matter whether someone came to me who was deeply religious or an atheist or any philosophical persuasion in between. Once I had them in deep hypnosis, they all told me the same thing about the spirit world and about their life between lives. At the moment of death, you rise above your body and you look back at it. Now, there have been a lot of near-death experience reports. There have been books written about near-death experiences, and certainly people who have gone through this have appeared on television and radio and have described to the public in many forums how they felt and what they experienced. But you have to keep in mind that in a near-death experience, we're talking about someone who is clinically dead only for a few minutes, so they wouldn't be around to tell what they experienced. In my case, I have a client in hypnosis for some 3 hours, questioning him about these things. They're also in a relaxed state. They're not undergoing any body trauma. So they're able to tell me in a very clear and forthright way everything that happened to them. Now, let me explain that there are two types of souls. There are the more advanced type and there are the beginner type souls. There are really a few more types, but I'll just talk about these essentially. The beginner soul, that is the person who has not lived all that many lives, sometimes has difficulty separating from their body. And not that they're not released at the moment of death, but they hang around. They want to go to their funerals, and we're so vain. You know, these people will describe how they want to find out who's coming to their funeral, who's bringing flowers, how much respect is their body being shown, you know, being cremated or being put into the ground or what have you. So you have that type of soul who's not really ready to leave Earth's astral plane immediately because they're a little disoriented, and also they're kind of reluctant to leave this life in which they've, you know, had so much enjoyment. Then you have the second major type, which are those souls who have been around a long time and they're very experienced. They usually leave very quickly. And so both types, when they look back at their bodies, I want to tell you that there is something that's uppermost on their mind, and that is to comfort the loved ones that are left behind. All souls will try to reach out and comfort those who are mourning their deaths. They will try to reach into their minds and soothe them in various ways and give them through thought, powerful thought messages, the understanding that they're still alive. Sometimes it's hard because, of course, when we're undergoing this kind of grief, you can imagine that we're so overcome with grief that we might shut down in terms of these messages. So these souls might not be able to reach their loved ones for perhaps days or weeks or months later. But that is the intent, to make them feel comfortable. Then, as they pull away, souls describe bright lights and tunnels, the same as the folks that tell us who have had near-death experiences that they have seen. Now, let me explain something I think is really important. We've heard a lot about people seeing religious figures who have undergone near-death experience. I find no case in all of the cases that I've had over all of the years that I've been working with people through their death experiences who have ever seen a religious figure. What they see are their spiritual guides. These are those loving beings who are their teachers, who come to them at the moment of death to guide them into the spirit world. Now, I'd like to also say that you may also see people who you have known in this life who have passed on ahead of you who will also come and welcome you back. And this too is a very wonderful experience. For instance, people will see their mothers, for example, or a best friend who may have died in front of them, or a brother or sister, this sort of thing. And it's a very ennobling and beautiful experience for them.
You listened to Michael D. Newton interview. Now, I'm going to present a documentary about verifying some of these past life memories. Peter Ramster, Australian psychologist, encountered several cases of past life memories among his patients. He chose 4 of them and recorded the sessions. And then he initiated an investigation by taking his clients to the country where they claimed they were in their past life. And he made a full documentary of the process.
Tried to pick my body up to get it moving so we could go and find Papa. That wouldn't move. It felt cold and funny. I felt myself being drawn away from there. No reason to stay. It's like I'm being lifted. And I'm being drawn towards a very bright light. And I just wanted to go to the light. And when we came out, the end was all white and bright. I want to know, what's happened? What's happened? And she took me to a big white building. She tells me to rest. He smiled at me and said, "You died, sweetheart. You died."
The man who helped them remember is Peter Ramster, a hypnotherapist with 7 years of intensive research into reincarnation, an interest stemming from his work in the broad field of analytical therapy. From more than 1,000 case histories, they were selected because they're ordinary people, claiming ordinary past lives, and because their stories could be checked. The first step was to examine exhaustively the stories the 4 women told under hypnosis, and then to take a long stride ahead of them and go to Europe. And there we began the complex, disturbing, and often frustrating search through old documents and fading manuscripts and crumbling registers, the painstaking detective work of accurate research. We wanted to track and pin down whatever facts we could find before flying our subjects out of Australia. They were excited and nervous as we made the final checks, careful and extensive checks to be sure they had not, in this life, travelled where we were going. We were taking them a long way, more than 15,000 miles to the far side of the world. Peter Ramster gave each of our subjects the post-hypnotic suggestion that she would recognize the place of her earlier life, and he was to travel with us all the way. Jenny Green had never been to Germany. Cynthia Henderson had never been to France. Helen Pickering had been to the United States, but not to Britain. and Gwen MacDonald had lived all her life in New South Wales, Australia. We took Cynthia to France for the critical steps in this experiment. First, though, a simple test to see whether she spoke or understood French without the aid of hypnosis. Few women can resist the sort of bargain Cynthia was being offered, but smiling and not understanding, she rejected the chance.
Too small.
We were satisfied that her French was at the very best rudimentary, but in a hypnotic state, in deep trance, there was a marked difference.
Oui. Le mariage. Famille. Le château.
Est-ce que vous avez connu quelqu'un à Saint-Michel?
Une petite maison. Non. La baie Saint-Michel. La baie.
Est-ce que vous avez déjà fait un portrait de vous?
Le court. Entourage de Versailles.
Her answers to Le Breton's questions were not fully fluent, but what was plain was that she understood what was being asked, even when she answered in English.
Quelle est la partie du château que vous avez vue?
The most striking feature are the doors and the porch. So that's the first thing you see when you come down the drive.
What about any feature windows? Is there any windows that are distinctive?
It has beautiful windows at the side, the opposite end to the tower. God, I can't look.
What's your full name?
James Archibald Burns. I don't like Archibald.
What don't you like Archibald?
Because it's my father's name.
Okay. Now you'll move to the time when you were in practice. I want you to describe to me where your practice is.
It's in Blackberry.
Blackberry is a small town in southeast Scotland. Dr. James Burns, according to Helen Pickering, had been in successful practice there, knew the town intimately, drank at a favourite tavern, and was a man of some substance and standing in the community. When we drove into Blackberry, Helen had no idea where we'd taken her. We hadn't discussed it, and we blindfolded her well away from the edge of the town, and without her seeing a signpost. And some things could be checked from the old local records and minute books, housed now below ground in a county library. And there we find traces and reminders indeed of James Burns, Doctor of Medicine, well known in Blagary's civic affairs.
I was very respected, I could say, on behalf of people. I was the Justice of the Peace.
Helen's talented drawing of the old College of Medicine was done weeks before in Sydney.
College of Medicine in Aberdeen.
That's the back or the front of it?
That's the main entrance here, and it's a big courtyard.
And what's behind there?
Well, if you look out the top windows in an easterly direction, you can see the Port of Aberdeen.
Right.
And that was where the library and lecture theatre were.
We find in Aberdeen an old and elaborate drawing of the Marshall College of Medicine as it had once been. But even when this drawing was done, it was after James Burns' time, and there had been many alterations inside and out.
This feels very familiar. Really? Oh, yes.
Any strong feelings here?
Well, I am, but my goodness, it's changed as well.
What has?
A lot.
Yeah, what do you think?
Well, this was all grass before, and that tower wasn't there. But,
What do you think this was?
the College of Medicine. This is all the original. Yes.
What's on the other side of the building?
Well, the building doesn't have a straight wall at the back. There, it goes out, I think, in a T. Oh, wow, look.
So you can describe it.
Yep, that wasn't there. That top floor, they've added that. And it finished there, because that's all new. All of that's new. Because from that...
Correct?
Yes, that's all new. Because from up at that top window, you could look right across.
So actually, when she drew the drawing, there were two floors at the back going out to there, stopping there. She actually drew the correct thing.
Yeah, that's right.
It was plain that Anne Gordon and Joanna Buchan were something more than surprised at what Helen had told them and shown them. David Gordon is the only man in the world who knows what the old College of Medicine was like. He's a very practical man who works in the field of oil sciences, but his passion is local history. He wrote a postgraduate paper on the history of the college and meticulously collected every existing plan and drawing, from the building's conception to its last restoration. He is the expert, except perhaps for Helen Pickering.
Great. Well, I believe that you could help me with some history about the old College of Medicine.
Yes, I'll certainly try.
Right.
But can you remember, I think you remember, about this building in the 1830s, Helen?
Yes, 1830s.
1830, any particular date that you can remember, just 1830s?
Early 1830s.
Early 1830s.
Right. It was a quadrangle, and the main entrance was at the centre of the quadrangle, but at the right-hand wing of the quadrangle, as you face the main entrance, was a chapel, and that ran down on the right-hand side. The building itself was 3 stories tall, and across the top floor were the dormitories. What I'm saying now is not there now,
Yes.
but it's how it was. There's also a second staircase that is, as you face the main entrance, there's another staircase that is in the building that goes up. It winds back and up, and up to the top floor, and that's a stone staircase. That is not there now because we went right through the building, and it's all new. They've obviously taken down the whole of the interior.
Yes.
Because there's just nothing there that resembles it at all.
That's part of the alterations that were made, and you give quite a good explanation of the college as it was by Archibald Simpson. I think we could have a look at some of the original architect's drawings, which may be of some interest.
David Gordon had been most careful not to let Helen see any of his papers or plans or drawings until she'd answered the pointed questions he wanted to ask. She answered them all, and to his satisfaction, starting with the position of that long-vanished staircase.
You look on this one here.
Yes.
That's the staircase you're looking at. Takes you to the east wing, and the other side, the west wing.
Right.
Now if you look on this plan here, that is the opening here.
Right.
It goes to the cloisters.
Right.
And then this is the staircase you're looking at.
So that's the staircase there, and that's no longer there.
That's no longer there.
Right, well, that's why I couldn't find
That's
it.
right. Well, you see.
Without having seen any marked floor plans, without ever having seen the original drawings, it was abundantly clear that Helen knew things about a building long ago altered from its shape in the 1830s. That she knew where an old staircase had once curved, where ancient walls had once stood. It was clear that she wasn't guessing, that she knew.
From this upper landing here, in the main centre here of the building, is it possible to look down into that main assembly hall?
Yes, it is, and it was, definitely.
Right, and that is a lecture theatre to the left?
That is lecture theatre.
Right,
Yes.
fine. Great.
Right. I wonder if you could tell me if you were at a tutorial and a discussion in the museum or the library and you wanted to wash your hands,
Yes.
where would you go? Is there a ladies' room?
Oh, men's room, please.
No? Yes, that's right.
From the second floor level here,
Yes.
you'd go along a small corridor and it was on the right, this side.
Now, would it possibly, let's have a look at this. There we are. From the main entrance, right, the museum, and on the right, up some steps to the right, and off the centre room.
There it is, there.
There's a closet there.
Right.
Yes, there is.
Are you satisfied that she knows more about this building than a person is likely to know who's never seen the building?
It would seem more than coincidental, quite frankly. It may be inexplicable in my terms, you know, but certainly from what she's discussed with me before she saw these plans, or even knew these plans existed.
Your paper on this, David, was never published. There's no way anybody could walk into a library and pick up a copy.
No, the only place there'll be a copy of my work is in the Open University Archives. And I don't think that Helen has any other Open University Archives.
She did long hours.
That's right. Especially never having been out of Australia.
Are you views of going deeper and deeper?
Jenny Green is an eminently sensible and stable woman, a housewife and mother living in the quiet suburbia of Sydney, Australia. There was no reason for us or her to suspect what was going to happen when she was entranced before our camera. And what did happen surprised and disturbed us all.
Fräulein, ich spaß Sie, der Vater. I don't want to go.